here with Michael DePlata, creative director for Shadow of War, here to walk us through a live game demo. Very excited about this one. I love Shadow of Mordor. Tell us about what we're going to see here.
Yeah, so it's the sequel to Shadow of Mordor, so we've really gone to a lot of effort to kind of make this bigger and better in pretty much every way. So we're here in one of the new regions of Mordor. This is in the south, it's Nirn, and something that's new in the game is we've added these sort of epic scale, Helm's Deep scale fortresses for you to conquer. And also one of our key features last time was the Nemesis system. Everyone had their own unique personal enemies. So we've expanded that, but we've also added new ranks to that as well. So the overlord that's in charge of the fortress, for example. So to conquer the fortress, we need to kill him. But as well as that, what we wanted to show a little bit of was the open world. So we've got the fortress, but then we also have these outposts that are spread throughout the kind of the sandbox and the open world. And before you go and take on the fortress, you can go and assault the outposts to weaken them, to draw out the different war chiefs and so on. So Evan, who's playing, he's just sort of moving through the open world. He's actually, that guy he just tackled, that's a treasure orc, so it's a new thing we've added. So killing these guys will give you money or different loot or gems to upgrade your gear with as well.
So I'm noticing a much greater variety of weapons. In the first game, it was pretty much your sword.
Yep.
In this, I've seen him just break out like a light spear.
Yeah, and he's doing that while mounted now. So that spear, that's actually, it's Aeglos, which is the spear of one of the elf heroes that battled against Sauron in the Second Age. So Celebrimbor's reforged that. Oh, the treasure orc died, so we've dropped a gem. And because our battles are so much bigger scale now, we can have, you know, hundreds of warriors in battle. Having that crowd control and that ability to have these big sweeping attacks against those guys, and also to fight while mounted using the spear expands that. Oh,
and
nice.
The ending of the original Shadow of Mordor was sort of like an assault on a keep. So it seems like you've taken that element and let people experience it throughout the game.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. We've taken it, we've expanded the scale of it, we've connected it to the Nemesis system, so the forts themselves actually express the personality of the different orcs and the overlords and the different tribes that they belong to. And also we've made it sort of much more integrated as part of the story. So now after you build your army, you really do get to conquer Mordor and take over these fortresses, upgrade them, install your war chiefs, and then defend them against the counterattacks and Sauron trying to take them back. So it's really an entirely new layer that we've added on top of the previous
You're
game.
Creating your own power hierarchy.
Exactly, which is a really natural place to take the Nemesis system, which was always about these power and these hierarchies of backstabbing and rising up through the ranks. So we've added a whole additional layer to that, and goals around why is it that you want this power and what are you going to do with it.
And you mentioned a couple times there being like different layers to the hierarchy, different roles within the organization. Can you give us sort of an outline of all those? Yep.
One of the things I really like about Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War is any enemy that you meet in the world, so any random grunt has the potential, if he kills you or achieves something else, to rise all the way up to ultimately become your personal arch enemy and villain in the game. So we have the grunts, who are the basic kind of troops within Mordor. We've expanded those because now we have the Olog High, so these these big trolls that are very effective in combat, so they add a new dimension to that. Then we have the captains, who at the next level they can be promoted with, but even within the captains we've added a ton more variety and challenge to fighting them because they now have different advanced classes. So we have tanks who can take a lot of punishment, commanders who can inspire other guys to fight harder, assassins, beastmasters, like a lot of these different classes. Then they have elemental weapons now, so fire weapons, poison weapons, cursed weapons that change that up, and then all of the different tribes have unique weapons as well. So there's a lot more meaningful variety even in just these individual fights that you're having against these orc captains. Then we have the war chiefs that lead the captains and can have them as bodyguards, so you're fighting those in groups. And then we have the overlords, who are the sort of ultimate boss fights. But then you can manipulate the orc society in other ways, because if you dominate different enemies, you can convert them to your side, and then they can potentially become spies who can stab their war chief in the back, or even become a spy inside the fortress. So as you're going to assault it, they'll just sabotage it for you.
There's so much palace intrigue going on.
Yeah, bodyguards that you can summon. So the manipulation of the whole hierarchy. Oh, this guy, Olrock the Strong.
Yeah.
So everyone, whenever I read comments on these, they're always just shut up and stop talking while the orcs are trying to talk. But
it said he was a machine commander. So can you tell us about? I know that there's, is it 4 different sort of machine type classes, like the type of societies they have?
Yeah. So the orc tribes, the different societies, there's 7.
7
initially. Yeah, so we have the machine tribe. These guys are all about industrialization. So here in Nern, you know, they're chopping down the trees, clearing ways for factories, smokestacks.
The Saruman
exactly.
followers.
Yeah, which is a really classic theme in Tolkien of kind of industry versus nature as well. Feral tribe, which is about the beasts and sort of taming and training or killing the monsters and creatures. Terror tribe, which is about using fear and intimidation and executing their enemies. But then, so he was a machine commander, so now you've got the machine tribe and those attributes, and then combining that with the commander class. So all of the possible classes and tribes can interact to make hundreds of different
and getting
classes.
influence in the machine tribe, for instance, would give you like access to more machine-oriented things. Is that how it works?
So there's a couple of ways that really affects the gameplay. One, if you put a machine commander in charge of the fortress, that's going to spread their influence through the world. So there's going to be more smokestacks, in the world, in those factories, and then more concentration of opportunities and enemies and followers around the outposts and so on. The chatter of the enemies changes, so it really just changes. It's a little bit like if it was an urban open world game and you go between different suburbs or different areas, there's a different cultural flavor to the city, and the tribes are kind of like that in how they put that layer over the world.
And something we noticed, actually when we were talking before, there was a character named Fubar. Something we noticed when it was being shown off at the conferences is that it seems like a lighter tone. It seems kind of funnier than the first one, which was pretty serious most of the time.
I think it's actually gone further in both directions. So it's more epic and it's more serious, and the stakes are higher, and the issues of the corruption and the Ring of Power and the tension between Talion and Celebrimbor and the stakes of what they're doing. They're behind enemy lines, raising an orc army to take on the Dark Lord. What sort of journey is that going to be for them?
Right.
So that can get pretty dark and serious and intense, and it's big epic battles. And then at the other end of the continuum, we do have these characters that bring levity.
Especially the Orc Society. Like they seem very like they're threatening. They're big, threatening monsters, but they're also kind of goofy and dumb.
They're kind of lunkheads at times.
Yeah,
they're definitely. The one thing we try to mostly. There's exceptions because we want to have a big variety, but the cliche we try not to fall into with them is that they're dumb. They're not cavemen.
Sure.
They're smart. They're just they've just really let their urges run away with them. They're just really driven.
They're really enthusiastic at times.
Yeah, very enthusiastic. So I think that brings an element of kind of just joy and fun to the combat, and well, it's almost like they're enjoying it. They're into it. But then at another extreme, I think we've almost got a little bit of horror in there as well. Some of our missions are sort of spookier and darker, which is something you see in Tolkien and Peter Jackson's movies. So just because the scale of the game's so much bigger, we just have to kind of broaden the palette of the different sorts of moods and stories and things that are happening.
And you really aim for that theatrical feel this time around, especially when you're about to assault the fort and you just see. And you just see your army just standing there getting ready to rush the whole thing. The overlords just overseeing his army of orcs. You really went for the kind of whole Two Towers, Return of the King kind of big theatrical feel there, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a word that gets overused, but for us, we really want this game to be epic. It's epic fantasy. So if we see Return of the King and we see, you know, Minas Tirith getting assaulted, or we see Helm's Deep, we really wanted to create that feeling of that epic scale, but still have it connect to what's really unique about our game, which is the Nemesis system and these unique personalities and characters and stories that only you are going to have in your game as well. And it's a huge amount of work to do that, but we're like so happy with how it's come together at the end.
Yeah, I'd love to pick your brain about the Tolkien influence and the Jackson influence, and how you sort of start with the research of both of those influences and source material for a game like this.
I think, yeah, that's a great question. And we put a lot of work into that. So it's obviously reading and watching the primary sources. So of course, you know, going back and rereading Lord of the Rings and rereading
highlighting the Silmarillion. Yeah, totally.
and there's a really great annotated version, and so many people have written so much about these books. You know, there's just so much academic research on different meanings. There's guys like Tom Shippey or Janet Croft that we get to work with, so diving into that. But then also I think it's really important to go back to the roots and the inspiration of Tolkien himself. So to go back and look at Norse myth, and to look at Beowulf, and look at the Kabbalah and Finnish myth, and, you know, look at there's another writer called Michael Moorcock, and he's one of the greatest fantasy writers, and you avoid becoming a straight imitator of Tolkien by going back to the roots of what he was also reading and was inspired by. So and then that sort of brings you into the world of all of these universal myths. You know, it's the hero with 1,000 faces, and the monomyth, and Joseph Campbell, and all of those. So then what we're trying to do is create this epic standalone story that you can play and enjoy whether you love Lord of the Rings or not, but that is very true to the themes of what Lord of the Rings is about, which is great because those themes are also extremely universal. So Tolkien, when he was asked what it was about, it was, you know, it's about death and the search for deathlessness, which is really not saying anything except saying that it's a story told by humans. Because pretty much every story from his point of view is that that's what we're driven by and to explore. So those themes, those really mythic themes, really tie so well to the Ring of Power and Talion and Celebrimbor and their story.
And you mentioned there's like a tension between Talion and Celebrimbor, and you mentioned like the stakes of what they're trying to do. Can you give us sort of a broad overview of what it is they're trying to accomplish this time around?
Yeah, so Talion, played by the amazingly excellent Troy Baker, in the first game he was very driven by revenge. We wanted a very fast, strong hook that could get you into the game and motivate you to exploring Mordor and hunting these orcs. Now, with Shadow of War, where we're able to create this bigger, more epic game, he's moved beyond that, and I think he's very driven by wanting to hang on to what remains of his humanity. So in a way, he's less driven by revenge and more driven by altruism and wanting to help these people in Minas Ithil and wanting to defend and hang on to humanity. From his point of view, it's almost post-apocalyptic. You know, it's after you've lost everything, people can put a lot into trying to hang on to what remains or what they're trying to hang on to and not get lost by that. And Celebrimbor is much more driven by just more practical concerns of power.
Yeah, it's less of a revenge story this time around.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that came to a head in the first one, but there was an implication that he was going to keep fighting at the end. So.
Yes, but now it's grown, the scale of everything's grown, and he's fighting for something bigger than himself, whereas Celebrimbor is just all about destroying Sauron. And ultimately, you know, we had Bruce, one of our Ologs, the other day put it like Bright Lord, Dark Lord, same thing really. Yeah. Celebrimbor is very inspired by that idea of Galadriel when she was offered the ring by Frodo. It's very much, I'm very tempted to take this, but if I did, you would have a Dark Queen in place of a Dark Lord. So, you know, Celebrimbor's doesn't have that same hesitancy that Galadriel had, and plus he very much believes that the new ring that he's crafted isn't corrupted by the influence of Sauron. So he's like, we can use this, we can use the power of the enemy against him, it's all going to be good.
Yeah, and in the first game, I felt like a cool narrative trick that it did was it teed up the rest of the story without contradicting anything. It became like a necessary part of the story, but not a, you know, even though you're working in your own universe. It became something that fit very neatly in that.
Yep.
So how do you sort of jump off of that into this one to continue the story?
I think it's the same principle. It's hopefully you do something that stands alone as a great story and does sort of fit in. I think what we're trying to do this time, to go further with that, is actually make this story slot into Lord of the Rings. So you can get to the end of this story and go and read or watch Lord of the Rings and even feel like you've maybe got some more cool insight or details into some of the elements of that. So Sauron and the Nazgul and, you know, Mordor, so it actually almost can hopefully sort of add a little bit of extra icing onto the enjoyment of Lord of the Rings.
Awesome. So when are we able to play it? When's it coming?
It's coming out on October the 10th, so not too far
Real
away
close.
now. So we're really excited. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, those couple of months after. I mean, it was originally set to come out in August, but it's a couple more months for just polish, polishing off some last bugs.
Cannot exaggerate how much difference that makes. Like a game of this size, to be able to balance, polish, optimize, you know, everything from the frame rate to the stability to the balance. We're really excited about how it's turning out.
We're really looking forward to
the scope of the Nemesis system. It's just so resource intensive. I mean, I can imagine trying to apply it to what's essentially a bigger world than what you established in Shadow of Mordor.
And just trying to test that as well. It's crazy.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We're definitely going to check it out in October.